221. Unique Magic Circuit. The Mandrake's Magic Eye Circuit was the most complex of the magical plants Vizette had encountered so far. At a casual glance, it looked like a writhing tangle, constantly shifting with a restless motion that made his head swim. Perhaps because of that complexity, the Mandrake had a place in ritual magic. Compared to modern magic, so precise that it can be cast with a wand, a gesture, or an incantation, ritual magic operates on a broader scale. Ancient wizards coped with that breadth by developing multi-stage rituals, continually breaking down and recombining steps until they produced the desired effect. Vizette fought the dizziness and sharpened his focus. This time he didn't limit his observation to the rootstock, he included the mandrake's leaves. That made a new discovery possible. The leaves contained a magic eye circuit, but it was completely different from the one in the rootstock. The leaves circuit was remarkably orderly, like one sturdy, stable nail after another, anchoring and stabilizing the chaotic circuit of the rootstock. He could sense a connection between leaves and rootstock. The circuit in the leaves flowed, subtly, into the rootstock. That new detail eased the vertigo and fired Vizette's curiosity. Under patient scrutiny, he could detect a faint mutual flow between the leaves and the rootstock's circuits. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. Professor Sprout circled the bench and came to his side. She bent over the repotted mandrake, inspecting the even soil and the plant's position in the pot. She was used to Vizette's careful work, but a pleased smile still softened her features. She straightened, patted his shoulder, and motioned for him to follow. They went to the second greenhouse. Once Professor Sprout closed the door to keep the mandrake's cries from reaching the corridor, they took off their earmuffs. Vizette rubbed his temple to clear the remaining dizziness. "Professor Sprout, is there something you need?" he asked. "These are for you." She opened her hand to reveal several tender mandrake leaves. Leaves from a recently repotted mandrake. They're perfect for animagus practice. Perfect? Vizette kept his magic eye active. The leaves in her hand still showed the orderly, nail-like magic eye circuit. Because they'd been picked, their circuit had stabilized and stopped flowing. He thought of what he'd seen and asked, "Do the leaves' effects change as the plant grows?" "Of course," Professor Sprout nodded. "When a mandrake matures, its leaves become hallucinogenic. In the Middle Ages, when mandrakes were common and easy to obtain, back then wizards would dry the leaves and brew them into a tea. Drinking it might inspire visions. But after the effect wore off, it dulled the senses and could even temporarily block the ability to cast magic." Vizette turned the leaves over in his hands, marveling at the plant's shifting usefulness. When young, a mandrake's rootstock was worthless for potions, and its cries were disorienting, but its leaves were suitable for animagus practice. When mature, the rootstock became a potent restorative used to enhance many potions, while the leaves turned into poisonous hallucinogens. Professor Sprout explained that the mandrake would need several repottings before reaching maturity. According to her, leaves could be harvested for animagus practice up to the second repotting. Vizette planned to use that time to study the plant with his magic eye and deepen his understanding. After a brief tour of the second greenhouse to admire other specimens, Professor Sprout returned the class to the third greenhouse to continue herbology. The mandrakes that had been repotted once were now aware of the world beyond their pots and constantly curious. Students were given small wooden mallets and instructed to tap the exposed roots continually, like a game of whack-a-mole. The tapping weaned the plants of their curiosity and taught them to fear the outside. It also encouraged them to absorb fertilizer and grow faster. Repotting and root tapping were special techniques Professor Sprout had developed to suit mandrake habits and greatly improved their survival. Wild mandrakes, without such care, rarely reached maturity. Class ended, and Vizette strolled down the corridor, sorting the notes he had taken. His records included Sprout's lecture and the magic eye circuits he had observed. Recording notes was only the first step. Organizing and categorizing them into something useful was equally important. There's no shortcut to success. Effort counts. Professor Lockhart's voice suddenly rang out. "No wonder Professor Flitwick and the others think so highly of you." Vizette looked up to see Lockhart holding a pot, one of the mandrakes they had repotted. Lockhart's smile was broad and practiced. Professor Sprout said this one was repotted by your hands. No one understands mandrakes better than I do. He added, with a self-satisfied chuckle. The first time I saw it, I knew it was extraordinary, robust, vibrant, just like you. Vizette stepped aside a couple paces to put some distance between them and picked up his pace. Lockhart didn't miss a beat. He fell into step beside him, still smiling. Vizette, may I call you that? After that first class, weren't you very interested in the memory charm? Why didn't you come to see me? Professor Lockhart, Vizette replied. There were many things at the start of term, new subjects and research to attend to. If anyone else said that, I'd think they were just saying it to flatter me. Lockhart beamed. But from you, I believe it. Lockhart wasn't wrong. Vizette had no intention of making this a mere formality. Since term began, besides his daily trips to the greenhouses to water and tend the plants, he had Rubik's Cube theory waiting for consultation and research. Lockhart would nod occasionally, basking in being recognized by a fan student, but his main focus never left Vizette. I heard from Professor McGonagall that you research magical objects, Lockhart said, rolling the news around like a sweet. Well, I'm very good at that too. Remember that book, Voyages with Ghouls? At the end, when I captured a rampaging ghoul with a tea strainer, that wasn't an ordinary tea strainer. He beamed. I put an undetectable extension charm on it. I trapped the ghoul inside, and when it tried to tear the strainer apart, its claws nearly shredded on the mesh. Vizette frowned. Undetectable extension charm? Professor Lockhart, I recall you said in Travels with Trolls. You learned it at an altar in an ancient wood, surrounded by mandrakes, Lockhart finished for him. But Voyages with Ghouls came out before Travels with Trolls. Were you already proficient then? Vizette asked. Lockhart's smile flickered. Ah, maybe I mixed things up. He tried to recover. It was a charm like the undetectable extension charm. Yes, that's it. He pressed on without missing a beat. That's why I realized how important the undetectable extension charm is, and why I studied how to learn it. The real point is, I can make magic items. This is an ancient discipline, born of ritual magic, then it branched into alchemy, and then into the simplified craft we call magical item creation. Gags, fireworks, trick wands are offshoots, but to make something like a philosopher's stone, you must go back to alchemy. Alchemy obeys an important law, equivalent exchange. Balance must be maintained. You can't let an item be stronger than its maker. Much of what Lockhart rattled off Vizette could verify in books. The man wasn't entirely inventing things. He took notes as Lockhart spoke, and they walked toward Lockhart's office. Lockhart was carrying a large clay pot, already out of breath. Sweat ran from his brow and dripped to the floor. His golden hair, somehow, remained immaculate. Vizette, do you know the scouring charm? He panted, ready to set the pot down. Vizette stepped forward, took the pot, and with a silent, wandless floating charm lightened its weight. Let me help, Vizette said. Professor Sprout warned us mandrakes can be dangerous. Right, Lockhart agreed, fumbling in his robe and producing a lilac handkerchief to dab at his face. Actually, I didn't mean anything else. I just wanted to test you. Professor McGonagall said you've used this sort of magic before, to make items. And one piece of advice, Lockhart added, suddenly paternal. Though we can do magic, we shouldn't apply it to everything. We're still human. Learn to live. Don't make magic the first solution for washing, bathing, hair. Those are life's simple pleasures. Learn to enjoy them. At the office door lay a pink package with a greeting card on top. Enjoying life. Vizette, Lockhart crowed, taking the card like a prize. I can't help it. I have too many fans. The card read, My dearest Professor Lockhart, I heard you were injured, and I hope our gift can help you feel more comfortable. Your most loving fan. The handwriting gave Vizette an odd sense of recognition. Lockhart tore open the paper. Inside was a lilac plush toilet seat cover. Lockhart's face went dark. He hurled the thing down the corridor with a wind-up throw that might have belonged to a chaser. Vizette's expression hardened. Years of discipline and private potions lessons had taught him restraint. No smile, no reaction. Seeing the gift, he knew who had sent it. Humph. Lockhart tried to steady his breath. Never mind. Come in. Inside the office was an explosion of self-image. The walls hung with frames, large and small, each portrait or oil painting depicting the same man, Lockhart. smiling in different poses. As Vizette entered, the portrait seemed to gleam in admiration. He set the flower pot down so it formed a makeshift screen between himself and Lockhart. The professor gave an odd impression, more of a theorist who loved stories of adventure than an actual battle-hardened adventurer. In the wizarding world, brilliant theory often came with talent. So far, Lockhart had shown flashy things, the Pesca-Pixie Pesternomi fiasco, and a seemingly miraculous use of the memory charm, but Vizette didn't sense the inner solidity he expected from such a celebrated man. Lockhart sipped water, then stood before him, twirling his wand between fingers like a pen. With a sudden clatter it fell, scattering a few sparks. "Oh, little rascal!" Lockhart laughed, oddly pleased. "I don't usually use the memory charm. It's throwing a tantrum." "Vizette, do you know wand lore? The wand chooses the wizard. Lots of witches and wizards don't understand that. Hence, they can't be someone like me." "I've studied it," Vizette said. Lockhart cleared his throat theatrically. "Ahem! Then let's officially begin. Wand lore? Bah! Memory charm." He brought over a small blackboard. "We'll start with hand movements, elegant, quick, like a conductor's baton. Rotate your wrist, then draw an N shape." He demonstrated with exaggerated grace. "Very standard casting movements. No wonder Professor Flitwick praised you," Lockhart said, eyes bright. "Next, the incantation. Watch my mouth and tone." As Vizette mouthed the words, Lockhart's expression tightened into surprised delight. "I didn't expect you to be this quick on the next step either. Ha ha! Truly impressive." 223. The Good and Evil of the Forgotten Spell. Vizette had set himself the goal of learning the memory charm over summer vacation. As soon as term began, he went straight to the library and hunted down every book he could find on the subject. Compared to ancient dark arts, the memory charm was a relatively recent invention. It dated back to the 16th century, credited to a witch named Mnemone Radford. From the moment it was invented, the memory charm was widely adopted. Wizards used it to erase muggles' memories of magic and of individual witches and wizards. The Ministry of Magic even created a special office because of the spell, the Memory Obliviator, and Mnemone Radford became the first to hold the title. The charm helped speed the signing of the International Confederation of Wizards Statute of Secrecy. Yet despite this, Mnemone Radford never became a household name on chocolate frog cards. Most wizards today know the spell, but not its inventor. History of Magic mentions her only briefly. Vizette found the fuller story tucked away in the library, Mnemone Radford's autobiography, Repentance in Memory, Suffering in Oblivion. In it, she equated the memory charm to the killing curse, arguing that erasing memory was tantamount to murder. Her grasp of magic and of the soul impressed Vizette. He could feel her thinking through the lines. Mnemone insisted that by destroying memories, the spell could kill at the level of the soul. She raised a Theseus's ship-style question. If someone's memories are completely erased, are they still the same person? The victim would have to relearn everything, reconnect with relatives, rebuild tastes and skills. When they reconstruct their life and gain new experiences, could they ever restore their original personality? Radford asked many questions she could not answer. The Ministry, eager to promote the spell as a force for good, shaped public perception of it as a necessary tool to protect the wizarding world. Mnemone Radford saw it as a great evil, something to be handled with extreme care. Perhaps because of that uncomfortable view, she did not receive the recognition her invention warranted. Vizette, with his soul maze, sympathized with Radford's worries. Memories matter. It had been through memories that he had last year slowed Lord Voldemort's progress through his soul maze and helped Professor Quirrell escape. He had even been forced into a sort of duel with Voldemort within that maze. He knew firsthand how integral memory was to a person's identity. There was a counter-curse for the memory charm, but because of the spell's nature, it was limited in its usefulness. A wizard who has been obliviated must first realize their memory was erased, and then they must know the counter-curse exists. Even then, the counter-curse has to be more powerful than the original erasure to restore what was lost. Meeting all those conditions usually requires external intervention, an auror or another observant wizard, plus a good deal of luck. Full restoration is rare. Knowing these difficulties made Vizette determined to learn the memory charm thoroughly, not to use it crudely as some wizards did. He hoped to master it in a way that understood its moral and metaphysical consequences. Professor Lockhart might have more practical guidance. Vizette reviewed the memory charm again following Lockhart's notes. Lockhart looked puzzled. Have you studied the memory charm before? A bit, Vizette admitted. Just some self-study after returning to school. A bit? Lockhart's voice rose, a brittle, theatrical edge to it. Vizette, are you telling me, when you go to the greenhouses in the morning for herbology and do transfiguration in your spare time, you still found time to teach yourself the memory charm? How long has term even been open? Oh, right, Lockhart continued, eyes brightening as if connecting unrelated clues. I've often seen you after lessons, guiding a blonde girl, Luna Lovegood, I think. Is she your sister? You this. Vizette replied evenly. Yes. Hogwarts is a bit complicated. I worried about her, but it's much better now. She's stronger than I was. Lockhart stared at Vizette's faint smile and felt a small, painful headache. He had planned to take a gradual approach, correct Vizette's accent and gestures first, win him over gently, but Vizette was learning too fast. There was no time for small theatrics. The big fish might slip away. Lockhart decided to show some real skill. Since you've already grasped the theory, he said, recovering his practiced smile, let's do something different. Many wizards treat the memory charm like a scouring charm, he continued. If muggles discover magic, you just wipe their memories clean. He shrugged. It's simple, crude, and effective. Of course, that's only true for muggles. For dealing with other wizards, that crude method leaves openings. At least with experienced wizards, flaws are likely to appear. Vizette's interest sharpened. Professor Lockhart, what should we do in that situation? Having spent a year at Hogwarts taught him one thing. When you don't understand something, ask. Lockhart arched an eyebrow, pleased his words had hit their mark. He smiled brilliantly. Although the memory charm is to me an ordinary spell, I never underestimate ordinary magic. 224. Ancient Magic, the Mind Transference Spell. Facing a student like Vizette, Lockhart understood he would have to reveal some real secrets to hold his attention. Fortunately, he was intimately familiar with the memory charm. He rephrased his understanding into longer, more redundant explanations and began teaching, hoping to buy himself time. Things, however, went further than he expected. His core secrets started to slip out. Vizette's associative mind was strong. He could extract the essence from Lockhart's redundant words by applying various magical principles, then think through them and ask precise questions. After several rounds of teaching, Lockhart felt an odd sense of déjà vu, as if he'd gone back to his student days and sat before a circle of classmates far more talented than he was. He was suddenly awkward and uneasy. Vizette, on the other hand, was in his element, calm, eager, and thriving. Lockhart's unique insights into the memory charm let Vizette learn quickly and deeply. He even began comparing the memory charm with occlumency, noting similarities and differences, sharpening his understanding of both. Vizette sorted his packed notes on the spot, reorganizing them so the content could become his own knowledge. After a brief arrangement, he found the memory charm could be understood through what he called a lever principle. He flipped through his pages, cleared his throat, and said, Professor Lockhart, I have some thoughts. Tell me if I'm right. Of course, Lockhart breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Vizette didn't keep asking, his most sensitive secrets might still be safe. Go ahead, ask anything, and if you need anything, just say so. Vizette nodded, looked around, and asked, Professor Lockhart, could I have a piece of paper? I have plenty. Lockhart flashed a grin and produced a sheet of pink parchment. The paper smelled faintly of perfume, and in the upper left and lower right corners a curlicued script read, Dear Miss, your favorite Gilderoy Lockhart. It was the kind of stationery he used for fan mail. Thank you. Vizette tapped his wand on the parchment and transfigured it into a miniature seesaw. Lockhart's eyelids twitched. He'd never seen Vizette transfigure like that. The object wasn't complex, but the technique was effortless. Lockhart remembered struggling to manage a simple transfiguration like that until his 4th year. This was far cleaner. Professor Lockhart, Vizette said, in Voyages with Vampires, you wrote about going to an amusement park with a vampire, didn't you? Lockhart nodded, then hesitated. Ah, yes, that was a seesaw. Right, a seesaw. Muggles have so many strange amusements. That vampire was too heavy, almost broke the seesaw. Vizette smiled and then gestured to the tiny seesaw between them. I think the principle of the memory charm is a bit like this seesaw. He tapped the base. This is the fulcrum. It's like the intention or purpose the caster brings when performing a memory charm. Lockhart felt a bead of sweat. The analogy was clever. It forced him to sit up straighter. Vizette pushed each end of the board with a finger so they rose and fell alternately. The board is the memory charm, and the act of casting is the play. The caster, using intention, can make precise, effective casts, so the memory charm's accuracy and effect depend on that intention. Yes, exactly, Lockhart croaked, forcing a smile. Precise. That's what I said. Absolutely right. And the last part, Vizette frowned slightly, is the counter charm, how to restore memories. I don't understand that. That's natural, Lockhart said quickly, relieved again to have a way out. It's already impressive you can cast the memory charm at your age. The counter charm isn't as important. Who would target a wizard? It's mostly used on muggles. He meant to brush it off, but Vizette kept going. Professor Lockhart, based on the seesaw idea, I've thought of a technique for the counter charm. Lockhart lost his composure. You, tell me? Vizette tapped the seesaw, pulling one end of the board back a little. You talked about emotion and said my knowledge wasn't enough, so it was hard to understand. But I felt something. When casting the counter charm, emotion becomes that fulcrum. If we cast the counter charm based on strong emotion, we can more easily break the memory charm. With that, Vizette had finished his first synthesis. He'd taken Lockhart's teaching, simplified it through analogy, and found a practical insight. At that moment, the wizard's combat manual in his mind stirred. Some of the ancient magic power he'd accumulated flowed into it. Among the rustling pages, a new ancient magic entry appeared. Ancient Magic, Thought Transfer Charm. Guides ancient magic power to cast magic, imbues the memory charm with special effects, achieves erasing or modifying memories by extracting entire memories. Vizette read the lines and felt a chill of excitement. Casting the memory charm through ancient magic power could, he realized, mitigate many of the spell's usual side effects. The phrase, erasing or modifying memories, mattered. This ancient magic could actually alter the content of memories. With that, even an experienced wizard would find it difficult to distinguish true memory from false. No one knows mandrakes better than I do, Lockhart crowed. We need to cast the counter charm attuned to our emotions, and then breaking the memory charm will be relatively simple. Vizette listened, feeling a hum of ideas in his head. Lockhart's confident certainty made him almost dizzy. The professor didn't say much, and yet he seemed to understand so many things. Lockhart's smile twitched twice. He tried to shake off the buzzing in his mind. Vizette, you could research those questions yourself. Haha. You can't always go poking into everything. He stumbled for a moment, eager to change the subject. He didn't want Vizette pressing further about memory charms. Lockhart glanced around the portrait-lined office for a distraction, and his eyes landed on the recently repotted mandrake on the table. Vizette, did Professor Sprout tell you about fertilizing mandrakes? He asked, brightening. They're so picky. Once you give them something good, they won't accept anything else, and if you take the good away, they'll crawl out and protest. Professor Sprout didn't mention that, Vizette said. That's why I managed to get a whole pot of mandrake from her, Lockhart went on, beaming. I'll add those little details and co-author an article with her. He waved a hand toward the drawer as if revealing a treasure. The magical world had its journals, Transfiguration Today, Charm Innovation, Practical Potion Master, and Hogwarts professors were regular contributors. Vizette knew Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, and Flitwick had all published pieces. Dumbledore, especially, had written many articles for Transfiguration Today when he was young. Vizette had recorded them all. Understanding them would take time, but even a preliminary reading would help his transfiguration. Lockhart pulled out a small bag from the drawer, a moving emblem on it, a dragon with sparks flying from its nostrils. What's better fertilizer than dragon dung? He crowed, tearing the packet open. A fan sent this to me. She adores Gilderoy Lockhart teaches you to rid your home of pests. Inside was a tiny shovel. Lockhart scooped out the old compost carelessly, scattered it on the floor, and then sprinkled dragon dung evenly into the pot. The mandrake's leaves twitched twice. Lockhart nearly danced with delight. See how happy it is? Look at those little leaves. I should read it my books. He actually took a collector's edition of Me, the Magical, from the drawer. Before it grows up, if I read to it a few times, it might become one of my fans. Vizette rose and bowed slightly. Professor Lockhart, I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for your guidance tonight. I learned a great deal. No problem. It's what a professor should do. Lockhart's grin was broad and proud. If you have questions, come to me anytime. Vizette left the office, still turning the memory charm over in his mind. Lockhart clearly guarded many secrets about it. Secrets he was desperate to hide, much like the spells used to control house elves. From their conversation, Vizette knew it would be very hard to get Lockhart to reveal those deeper truths. He's an odd man, Vizette thought, but his understanding of the memory charm is surprisingly deep. He rounded a corridor and ran straight into Fred and George, who cut him off with exaggerated, worried faces as if they'd found him on his deathbed. Vizette, you were in Lockhart's office for ages, Fred demanded. Tell us, did our greatest adventurer teach you some sort of magic? Which magic? Vizette asked. Fred laughed. A powerful transfiguration to give you beautiful golden curls and a quill that writes in perfect calligraphy. Or a potion, George added, twirling a lilac plush toilet seat cover anxiously. One sip, and every magical creature will think you smell like a horned serpent and hunt you down for your autograph. Vizette smiled. He didn't give me a potion, and he didn't teach me transfiguration. Oh, thank Merlin, George exhaled. If you'd stayed in there, we'd have had to come and rescue you. We were afraid you might be brainwashed into becoming an adventurer, Fred said, mock horrified, planning to defeat your house ghost and then write a book about it. Imagine, George added with a grin, forgetting your homework and saying you were researching ghost-defeating techniques. That would be the perfect excuse. I wasn't brainwashed, Vizette said. I just learned a memory charm. Good, Fred relaxed. As long as our materials consultant doesn't decide to be the next Lockhart, I can sleep. If you ever want to write a book, George said, patting Vizette's shoulder, we can help with ideas. 3 minds brainstorming. There's a market in that. Yeah, Fred agreed. We could call the series How to Skip Class Without Getting Caught. If you don't like that title, we can drag Harry in for a bit of fame, George added, already scheming. 226. Lockhart in Coma. Just as Dumbledore had suggested, there were things to learn from Lockhart besides magic. The Weasley twins were proving that right. George grinned. If we just add Harry, this book series needs a new title. What should we call it? Fred thought a moment. How about Potter the Savior's Secrets of Laziness? What do you reckon? Harry's fame will blow Lockhart's out of the water, I promise. That would sell better than Magical Me. As the three laughed, Vizette caught the faintest sound, a sort of high-pitched scream that left him momentarily dizzy. It wasn't only him. George and Fred stiffened as well. The twins reacted most strongly. In perfect sync, they leaned on each other for support. Strange. Vizette frowned and immediately slipped into the guardian meditation method. His head cleared. Putting the ringing in his ears with the dizziness, he mused, could that be a mandrake? He tore a page from his notebook and transfigured it into 3 earplugs. Once they were in, the dazed feeling faded. Vizette ran to the office. The desk was a mess, soil scattered everywhere and a small hole in the middle of a flower pot. A collector's edition of Magical Me lay mostly buried under dirt, Lockhart's exaggerated grin frozen on the cover. The mandrake lay on the floor, its roots twitching stiffly, fiddling with something. Vizette moved closer and saw the mandrake was using its roots to shove fertilizer into a hole in the pot, shrieking as it worked. He cast basic plant cultivation, lifted the mandrake by its leaves, and settled it back into the flower pot, returning the original fertilizer. Only after the plant was secure did he remove his earplugs and look toward Fred and George. The Weasleys took out their earplugs as well. George wore a mischievous grin. Hey! Our professor! He fainted! Must have been the mandrake's scream. Tsk-tsk. That's priceless, Fred said, his smile wide. George's voice suddenly turned mock serious. How can you joke about that? He's our beloved adventurer. Oh, right. Beloved professor. Fred put on a solemn expression. I'm terribly upset. Very, very upset. Vizette cleared his throat. We should still take him to the hospital wing. There was still a sheet of parchment on the desk. Vizette transfigured it into a trolley, and with the twins' help, they lifted Lockhart onto it. "Your transfiguration's brilliant," Fred praised as he pushed. "Professor McGonagall uses your work as an example in class. Shame it's hard to find a place to put us to practice. Filch knows too much." George sighed regretfully. Filch suddenly materialized, Mrs. Norris at his heels, voice sharp. "A fainted professor, is it?" "Aha! Finally I have something on you. How brazen, knocking out a professor," he scoffed. "Mr. Filch." "He passed out from the mandrake's scream," Vizette explained, holding up the flower pot. "We were affected by it as we walked past. This plant is dangerous. You should be careful." "Do you expect me to believe that?" Filch's tone cooled as he stared hard. "That blonde, those golden locks, Lockhart, isn't it?" He squinted with obvious disgust. "Misusing magic, sending out all those ridiculous cards. He isn't a decent sort." With a final scowl, he limped off. Watching Filch's retreating back, Fred said with interest, "He seems to know a lot about Lockhart." George nodded. "Of course, Filch was the caretaker when Lockhart was at school. He must know secrets." Vizette still worried about Filch's expression. "He won't let it rest, will he?" George glanced toward Mrs. Norris, trailing behind. "Of course not. He'll tell Professor McGonagall, but we're not worried." Fred was confident. "With you to back us up, even if McGonagall comes, she won't say much." He changed the subject. "Oh, should we lock that thing up in an iron cage? It keeps following us." "Later," George said, "when we're out at night. Right now, we're doing a good deed. We'll save the mischief for when we mean to be bad." Though the twins loved pranks, they were popular in Gryffindor. Their cheerful nature and steady schoolwork, aside from lost points in potions, kept them in good standing. That only made Filch gnash his teeth more. As they grew older, it became harder to catch them in the act, let alone punish them. In the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey praised the trio. "No Wiggenweld potion necessary, no odd magical wounds. Well done." She bent over Lockhart. "Knocked out by a mandrake's scream, minor. A good night's sleep will usually sort it." No lasting effect." She touched her wand to Lockhart's temple. "Do you know how long he listened?" "No more than 5 minutes," Fred said with a grin. "That scream was powerful. We only heard a bit and already felt awful." "He's fine then. No memory damage. A good night's sleep will fix him." Madame Pomfrey moved Lockhart onto a bed. Filch and 2 professors arrived, Mrs. Norris in tow. Professor McGonagall looked first at Vizette and the others. "Did you wear earplugs?" When they all nodded, she finally relaxed. Professor Sprout glanced at the flower pot with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "I told him that pot was a bit special. I thought he'd know how to handle it." Sprout knew mandrakes were particular about their care. She had brought this one out intending to figure something out. Lockhart had been there and had patted his chest, boasting, "No one understands mandrakes better than I do." For that reason, she had entrusted the mandrake to him. Having confirmed Lockhart was all right, Sprout and McGonagall exchanged a look, and both couldn't help the faint twitch at the corners of their mouths. 227. Squib Filch. "Filch, I think it's quite clear," Professor McGonagall said, looking straight at him. "This was an accident. They were simply passing by." Fred winked at Vizette as McGonagall spoke, as if to say, "See? Told you." Filch's face collapsed. The sneer he'd worn on entering the hospital wing vanished, replaced by a miserable, humiliated look. His voice scraped like nails on glass. "But I saw them. They were conspiring with Peeves. Patients need rest." Madame Pomfrey snapped, her eyebrows shooting up as she addressed them all. "If you have something to say, take it outside." Filch fell silent. He limped out of the hospital wing, dragging Madame Norris with him, glaring fiercely at Fred and George as he went. Fred and George high-fived and whooped, grinning from ear to ear. Vizette watched them disappear down the corridor and shook his head thoughtfully. Filch was a squib. Neither teacher nor student, neither wizard nor muggle. That ambiguous, marginalized place left him brittle. Unable or unwilling to admit the humiliation he felt, he turned it into resentment and a mean-spirited need to prove himself. He had few friends at Hogwarts. The only real companion he allowed himself was the cat, Madame Norris. Years of solitude had hardened him, and his constant exposure to other people's magical ease only exacerbated his bitterness. He judged the lively students before they'd even open their mouths, and met them with scorn and sharpness. His lack of magic, watched daily while students practiced spells, helped make him the man he was. Outside the hospital wing, Professor Sprout reached for the potted mandrake Vizette still held. "Let me have another look," she said. She cradled the pot and examined it closely. "There's still some dragon dung, very fine quality, but it's all pushed to the edges. Just as I thought, the original fertilizer was special, and this little fellow clearly took to it." She handed the pot back. "It looks like this one will be in your care from now on." "Can we have 2 mandrakes?" Fred and George asked in perfect synchronicity, Fred looking at Sprout and George at McGonagall, their faces full of hope. McGonagall adjusted her glasses, and a hard light came into her eyes. "The caretaker's job is important, and Hogwarts needs Filch. Madame Norris is out of the question. She's a cat." As head of Gryffindor, she knew exactly what the twins were up to. A little mischief from apprentices was tolerable. Their talents were real, and she did not want them led astray. But mandrakes were dangerous and demanded respect. She would allow some liberties and clamp down on others. "How could we do such a thing?" George put on an offended pout, hands dramatically raised. "We're just interested in plants." "Exactly. We want to improve our herbology." Fred echoed with an exaggerated sigh. "We want to get as good as Vizette." "If only that were true," McGonagall said, stifling a laugh. "I can certainly give you more homework. That's another way to improve. How about less time experimenting with boggarts, dead cockroaches, and doxy eggs, and more time on transfiguration? I could do that right now." "Aha!" The twins clutched their stomachs in unison. "It must have been the mandrake cry we heard. That's why we feel unwell." They retreated down the corridor with theatrical groans and stumbling steps, clutching their midsections until they were out of sight. McGonagall rubbed her forehead with a resigned sigh. Sprout chuckled. "They're hard to control. Last time they crawled into the 3rd greenhouse and took an interest in the venomous tentacula." "You can't let them near those," McGonagall frowned. "The tentacula's venom is dangerous." Sprout nodded. "That's why I set protective charms. They got stuck in the swamp because of it, actually." "But they're persistent," McGonagall said. "They seem strangely fond of that swamp. They come back just to soak in it." Vizette guessed exactly what the twins were after: the protective magic. They'd likely been studying how Sprout's charms created the swamp and wanted to reproduce it. Sprout turned to Vizette. "Vizette, do you feel confident you can look after this one alone?" The mandrake was a magical specimen, its circuits and peculiarities worthy of study. If he could keep it, it would be invaluable. He had an old, basic magic, what he called elementary plant cultivation, that should help keep it docile and healthy. He nodded. "Professor Sprout, I'll take very good care of it." Ever since Fred and George blew up that iron cage, the house elves had scattered through the castle. Mischief ran in both their veins, and they took to Peeves instantly, forming an alliance that made life livelier and more chaotic for the students. When the house elves pelted students with chalk, Peeves turned up with a sackful to resupply them. When Peeves wanted to stir a corridor into mayhem, the elves threw their voices and laughter into the work and nudged suits of armor until they tumbled. When Filch tangled with Peeves, the house elves would seize Madame Norris and leave Filch in an impossible position. Peeves was a poltergeist. Dealing with him was a headache. The house elves, however, posed a different sort of problem. Annoying but manageable. When the students banded together, they could corral the elves, who could not match the organized resistance of a dozen determined pupils. After several days of roundups, each house's common room had acquired 1 or 2 small iron cages containing house elves, much to the mixed amusement and dismay of the pupils. 228. Inner Vision Magic Circuit. In the Ravenclaw common room, Vizette discovered that the magic eye, used alongside Imperio, was surprisingly well suited to magical research. He also had another tool at his disposal, an ancient spell called Ancient Magic Soul Binding Charm. He cast the Soul Binding Charm to control the pixie in the small iron cage before him. He still remembered Lockhart's claim that pixies possessed a peculiar talent. They could absorb mockery and turn it into energy. The sensation of casting the Soul Binding Charm was similar to Imperio. It let him probe the pixie's mind, and when used with the magic eye, everything changed again. Instead of the usual outside observer's view of a magic circuit, he slipped into something like inner sight. It was like descriptions from novels he'd read in his previous life, seeing meridians inside a body with inner vision. With the magic eye and the soul-binding charm working together, he could peer inward at the pixies' magic circuits. From this vantage, they were far more intricate than they had seemed before. Circuits fanned into the arms, the torso, the shoulder blades. After the Mandrake Circuit's baptism, complex patterns no longer made him as dizzy. He felt markedly steadier. Still, whenever he had to think and record the circuits, a bit of vertigo crept in. With Luna's help, he took a pen. Gentle breezes brushed past them, carrying a faint, elegant scent of grass and wood. The soul labyrinth, the guardian meditation, and those breezes all combined to help him recover. Gradually, he was able to hold the pen and write. The pixie's circuitry was complicated, and he had a private lesson at 2 in the afternoon, so he decided to focus mainly on the shoulder blade region. It tied directly to the pixie's flying ability. As he recorded, the corner of the magic eye occasionally flickered with little flashes from the circuits. Hidden networks lay threaded in the pixie's body. Vizette had a hunch that the flickering lines might be the key to the pixie's power to absorb mockery. It wasn't the right moment to capture them, though. He needed to find ways to lengthen the active window of those circuits. When he finished, he exhaled and shut off the magic eye and the soul-binding charm. His body lightened and thirst hit him. In front of him sat a steaming cup of herbal tea. Beneath notes of mint and jasmine, there was a special sweetness that suggested Dittany honey. Luna leisurely swirled her cup to let the aroma spread, and seeing he'd recovered, handed him a tissue. "You've sweated a lot. Drink something first." Vizette nodded but hesitated before picking up the cup, then noticed Luna held one too. She shook it gently. "I have one as well." They smiled and, in almost identical motions, cupped their hands around the warm mugs and sipped. The tea's temperature was perfect. The balance of sweetness and floral perfume made it delicious. After a cup, his energy felt restored, and he returned to the notebook filled with diagrams. Luna leaned over. These looked so free, so light, like they could fly. She often had uncanny insight into images. Even if she couldn't see magic circuits, she could sense the purpose of the lines in a drawing. "This is the secret I just found. Something about the pixie," Vizette said, "but some parts still need tweaking." He wasn't as gifted as Luna at sketching. His lines always felt stiff, lacking flow. Here, Luna traced an arc in the air above the paper with her finger. "Make it rounder. It will look better." He picked up his pen. "Like this? A little rounder." Luna took the pen and, shoulder to shoulder with him, drew a graceful curve. Even though others couldn't see the circuits, Luna's sense of what looked right was like gold to Vizette. With her help, he refined the pixie's magic schematic until it matched his memory more closely. Outside the castle, the sun climbed higher, and the day grew warmer. Vizette checked the time. He should find Professor McGonagall. He bade Luna goodbye and left the common room, took the moving staircase, and arrived at McGonagall's office. The door was ajar. Through the narrow gap, he could see the desk and, perched on it, a tabby cat. The cat's face was indistinct from that angle, but one plump paw was rolling a ball of yarn back and forth. The stern Professor McGonagall had evidently become a tabby cat and was playing with yarn. Vizette adopted deliberately heavy footsteps and knocked slowly. "Professor McGonagall, may I come in?" "Come in." McGonagall stood before him in a dark green robe, her expression as composed and serious as ever. But when Vizette noticed the ball of yarn on the desk, he felt she might not be entirely without warmth. Without warning, she began to shrink. The dark green of her robe rippled into tabby stripes, and the rims of her spectacles became patches around feline eyes. The tabby leaped onto the desk, the vibration sending the yarn rolling. She reached out an instinctive, plump paw. Watching the movement, Vizette wondered briefly whether an animagus might, to some extent, be governed by the instincts of the creature they assumed. Professor McGonagall shook herself, as if dispelling such a thought, then sprang and expanded back into human form midair. Stripes gave way to her dark robe, and her spectacles settled firmly on her nose. She said, "This is a high-level transfiguration. It is extremely dangerous." "Vizette, what did you observe from my demonstration just now? What are the points worth noting?" 229. The extremely complicated animagus steps. All right, Professor McGonagall. Vizette paused to collect his thoughts, then began with the most obvious points. First, the defining features of an animagus. It doesn't require a spell or a wand. Second, it's at will. The whole transfiguration is very flexible. However, he added, I think these traits are similar to wandless and nonverbal magic. Both require a lot of practice to achieve reliably. Very good. Professor McGonagall nodded, pleased. Anything else? I also found some other information, Vizette went on. An animagus in animal form retains certain markings, which the Ministry records. Mastering the animagus form is fraught with unpredictable dangers, he continued. Besides regular practice, you need a bit of luck to get through the whole process. Professor McGonagall nodded several times, a small smile tugging at her lips. She could see how much work Vizette had put into his preparation. Gathering scattered references on animagi from across many sources wasn't easy. Beyond the organized facts, Vizette had offered an original insight inspired by the image of McGonagall herself, batting at a ball of yarn when she turned into a tabby. He asked, Professor, if someone becomes an animagus, will animal instincts surface? Of course, McGonagall agreed. It is a wonderful state, but you have to overcome those instincts, not give in to them. Animal instincts. That's an intriguing way to look at magic, Vizette mused. If you could see magic from an animal's point of view, might you reach different conclusions? If a wizard could transform into a magical creature, say, a dragon, how would a dragon's breath differ from a fire-making spell cast by a wizard? McGonagall's eyelids twitched. She was still surprised by the breadth of Vizette's thinking. But she needed him to understand how dangerous such speculations could be. She tapped the table, fixed him with a stern look, and said, Vizette, I must stress again that the risks involved in completing an animagus are considerable. She waved her wand. An aged parchment scroll appeared and unrolled itself across the table, revealing a meticulous hand-drawn image of a small, slender human figure with a massive bull's head. This is a wizard from ancient Greek times, she said. Perhaps you've heard the name through Muggle stories, the Minotaur. He lived on Crete and was an animagus. In an experiment to increase his power, he tried to transform further. The Minotaur sought the form of a Reum, but the experiment failed. He could never change back to his original form and remained half man, half bull for the rest of his life. Vizette matched the illustration with the text he had researched and reached a conclusion. Professor McGonagall, can I understand this to mean that the transfiguration target for an animagus is limited to ordinary animals? Exactly. That is crucial. McGonagall nodded emphatically. Even if you're adept at animagus transformations, attempting to push yourself toward a magical creature invites unpredictable consequences. Not only the Minotaur, she continued, but there are rumors that the Sphinx, now classified as a magical creature, originated from a group of ancient Egyptian wizards. Those wizards sought to gain the magical talents of a cat or panther and tried to transform themselves. Their transfiguration failed, and they were trapped in a half-human, half-lion form, forced to reproduce in that state. Her face grew serious. You have a great aptitude for transfiguration, Vizette, but with animagi, you must be extremely careful. Wizards can study magical creatures to learn magic akin to their talents, but there are always subtle, fundamental differences between the two. Wizards rarely glimpse the true nature of a magical creature, and when they attempt an animagus to mimic such a being, those differences are magnified, often irreversibly. The phrase, glimpse the true nature, stirred something in Vizette. He remembered his midday experience. Using the ancient magic, soul-possessing charm, and his magic eye, he'd seen, inwardly, the house elf's magical circuitry. Could that have been a glimpse of a magical creature's essence? It was not the time to follow that thought. A solid foundation was essential. Vizette formally began his animagus studies under Professor McGonagall. Mastering the animagus involves long waits, unpredictable hazards, and tedious steps. The first step was to hold a mandrake leaf in the mouth, continuously, from the first full moon until the next, maintaining it for an entire month. The leaf must not be swallowed or spat out. If it is, the wizard must restart this step at the next full moon. During the wait for the second full moon, the wizard must prepare auxiliary materials, a perfectly clear bottle, a teaspoon of dew, and a death's head hawkmoth chrysalis. Special precautions apply to the dew. It must be dew that has not been exposed to sunlight or any living thing for 7 days. If the second full moon is cloudy or rainy, the first step must be restarted. If all goes well, the second step begins on the second full moon. The wizard takes the bottle, exposes it to moonlight, and places inside it the mandrake leaf, the pure dew, the chrysalis, and a strand of the wizard's own hair. After this is done, the bottle must be buried and left undisturbed. If the bottle is dug up prematurely or exposed to light accidentally, the entire process must be restarted. The third step is another long wait. At sunrise and sunset, the wizard points his wand at his heart and chants, Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus. During this period, abnormal heartbeats, either strong or weak, may occur. These are normal. Most importantly, the wizard must control his curiosity. The buried bottle containing the hair will generate a powerful attraction, constantly tempting him to check on it. The waiting is long, and choosing a secure, secluded burial site is critical. When a storm arrives and the first lightning splits the sky, the wizard must immediately go to the burial spot for the fourth step, digging the bottle up. If the preceding steps have been carried out properly, everything inside the bottle will have dissolved, leaving only a blood-like liquid, just enough for a single gulp. 230. To explore the inner soul. To explore the inner soul. Professor McGonagall spent a long time walking them through the 4 preparatory steps. Vizette couldn't help but sigh as he looked over his notebook full of procedures, extra notes, and precautions. Mastering the animagus transformation was clearly no easy task. Having picked up a little ritual magic already, he had even learned the casting method for the aguamenti charm from ritual texts. Vizette recognized the structure of what McGonagall was teaching. Taken together, the steps formed a complete ritual. When she finished the last point, she cleared her throat and said, "Let's take a short break." Unlike her usual lessons, which demanded lively back-and-forth questioning, the animagus preparatory work required a patient, detailed explanation of specifics and key points. That complexity made the learning process much safer and the final transformation easier to manage. Going through it all in one sitting had left her throat a little hoarse. She glanced at the dense notes in Vizette's book and gave a faint, satisfied nod. Delivering so much material and having a student who could keep up and take thorough notes was a relief. McGonagall tapped the table with her wand. In an instant, a tea set appeared, steam curling from cups already poured with strong black tea. She rose and took a round tin from a drawer. Inside were small biscuits, mostly shaped like tiny fish. Black tea and biscuits were her favorite afternoon pairing. On weekends, she and Professor Sprout sometimes stole a moment like this to relax together. "Vizette, have a rest," she said kindly, setting the tin beside the tea. "It's the weekend. Help yourself." "Thank you." Vizette blew on his cup, took a cautious sip, then bent his attention back to his notes. He had already gone through the preparatory steps once and listed the required materials. "Do you have any questions about the ingredients?" McGonagall asked, glancing at his notebook. "Pomona mentioned you've dabbled in ritual magic." "I do," Vizette replied, "which is why I can tell the animagus process is essentially ritual magic." "Yes?" McGonagall adjusted her spectacles with a touch of surprise. Vizette had clearly read widely. "What stands out to you about these materials?" He turned his notebook so she could see. "First, this dew that hasn't touched sunlight or a living thing for 7 days." Ollivander's recommended books had taught him a great deal about potion ingredients and their ritual uses. Combining that knowledge with a careful reading of the preparatory list made the purpose clear. Dew carries associations of protection and purification, and 7 is a powerful magical number. Rituals don't often demand such strictly guarded dew. Dew untouched by living things preserves its pure connection to nature, McGonagall offered. 7 days is a complete natural cycle, which amplifies that purity. Putting the two together accomplishes inner cleansing and rebirth, and it acts as a safeguard during the transformation, Vizette said. It helps the process of changing both body and soul. "You're understanding this clearly," McGonagall said, a hint of approval in her voice. His deductions matched what she had worked out when she first studied these steps. Vizette nodded. "I've read the ritual texts," he said. "One more point," McGonagall added. Only dew that is sufficiently pure and potent can faithfully carry the wizard's inner intent. It helps determine the specific form the animagus will take. That explains a lot, Vizette murmured, quickly writing down the note. He moved on. Next is the chrysalis of the death's head hawkmoth. It's an intermediate stage between caterpillar and moth, another symbol of transformation and rebirth. And it's specifically the death's head hawkmoth, McGonagall mused as she sipped her tea. A moth not native to these parts, with a distinctive appearance. The skull-like marking on the adult's back is a warning, Vizette said. I think the ritual anticipates the fear and resistance a wizard would naturally feel during such a radical change. Using the death's head hawkmoth emphasizes those elements, acknowledging fear while giving it form so it can be managed. As a chrysalis, it also represents protection, he continued, and the skull pattern on the adult reinforces that protective symbolism. McGonagall smiled, partly in relief and partly in admiration. You've not missed anything. It's all very complete. For a moment her expression grew pensive. An excellent student like this, and in Ravenclaw, she thought. Perhaps only Ravenclaw could foster this sort of meticulous brilliance. She took a fish-shaped biscuit and chewed slowly, as if to quiet the distracting thoughts in her head. There is also the timing, Vizette added. Ritual magic often uses the phases of the moon to opposite effects. Some older curse rituals were performed after the full moon, with the new moon being most potent for that purpose. Protective rituals, on the other hand, tended to be performed on or just before the full moon being the most favorable time. Animagus requires 2 full moons, he said, looking down at his notes. That choice seems aimed at protection and wholeness. He frowned slightly, then reached a conclusion that pleased him. Professor McGonagall, may I put it this way? Animagus isn't just about changing the outward form. More importantly, it's an inward exploration. It's about understanding the soul. Through careful and layered protections, he went on, a wizard can safely and directly examine their inner self. Whoever devised this method understood how to make that introspection both possible and secure. McGonagall did not hide her smile. You are very perceptive, she said. I had expected we'd need several lessons to get this far. 231. Broken wand teaching, Vizette had been almost effortless. Some things only needed a brief mention, and he would make the connections, integrate what he'd learned, and deduce the deeper meanings. Professor McGonagall had planned to spread the lessons over several weeks, slowly guiding him into the deeper study required for an animagus transformation. Unexpectedly, in a single lesson, she had already given him everything she could. It felt a little unfinished, as if something remained unsaid. She understood that a professor's role on the path of magic was to guide. Further progress depended on the student's own exploration. Yet the role felt almost too easy, like placing a signpost. Vizette only needed to glance at it to know which way to go. She stood, took a notebook from a drawer, and handed it to him. These are some of my notes from when I studied animagus, she said. There are also ideas I had while deriving the ritual, insights that might help you. Vizette took the notebook with both hands, curiosity alight in his face. He opened it and found detailed entries, color-coded thoughts, and careful analyses. Professor McGonagall, this is invaluable, he exclaimed. I'll guard it and study it thoroughly. It's what I should do, she said, waving him off. There's still time before the full moon. You can try the first step now, and begin gathering the materials for the second. If you don't understand something, come and ask me. He thanked her again and left her office, tucking the notebook safely into his pocket. He couldn't risk reading it while walking, but he could look over his own notes. Turning the corner in the corridor, he heard voices ahead. Ron sounded despondent. Hermione, you don't know how to fix it either? You were in the library with Harry and me, and we still couldn't find a way to restore a wand, Hermione replied. Professor Lockhart even says in Year with a Yeti that once a wand is broken, it can't really be restored. At best, you repair the surface. Write home and ask Mr. Weasley to buy you another? Harry suggested. They definitely won't buy me one. Ron snapped. I broke it in a fight. Mum will say I brought it on myself. Vizette's interest piqued. A damaged wand, he wondered what kind of break it was and whether it resembled damage from ancient magic power. He approached as Harry and Ron drew closer. Ron held a wand snapped in the middle, a slender unicorn tail hair threaded through the shaft, holding the two halves together just enough that it hadn't fallen apart. Vizette? Harry jogged up to him. Did you see? Slytherins changed their kit. Everyone's got new Nimbus 2001s. Vizette smiled. That's extravagant. The Nimbus Racing Broom Company had made a name with the revolutionary Nimbus 1000, and the Nimbus line had dominated professional Quidditch ever since. Their brooms were expensive and geared towards speed. School teams rarely used true racing brooms, which demanded real skill. Harry animatedly described how the Slytherin team had shown up at the pitch with signed permission from Snape to train a new Seeker. Ron filled in the rest. Malfoy was the new Seeker, and all the brooms had been supplied by his father. They mocked Fred and George's brooms, said they were for sweeping floors, Ron added. So Fred and George couldn't help themselves. They made a few tricks, small mud pits, and Flint's leg got caught and he fell. That Flint, Ron raged, the captain, he's got to have troll blood. He jumped up and charged like a blunderbuss, roaring and everything. Harry and Ron reenacted the scuffle with hands and feet. Ron's wand, already weakened, drew a jagged line through the air. That's when he stammered, his face beet red. The wand slipped free and flew. Vizette immediately lifted his own wand, gave a small upward flick, and caught Ron's flying wand in his palm. Ron's cheeks flushed darker. That's how I lost it. Then that big Slytherin stepped on it. Vizette laid the broken wand flat on his palm. Wands are surprisingly fragile, he said. They're mainly just the shaft and the core. Magic and physical force can both do damage. He murmured the magic eye charm and examined the wand's internal channels. Unlike breaks from ancient magic power, which left weird, fused patterns, this wand showed clean broken conduits, severed but structurally intact enough that, in theory, they could be repaired. Still, he didn't move until he asked, "What do you want to do with it, Ron?" Ron turned an even redder shade. "I was thinking, I'll tape it up and make do for the rest of the year." Vizette examined the broken wand with care and then explained patiently, "Ron, if you only tape it back together, it'll be very easy for a wand backfire to occur." Wand, backfire. Ron paled at the words, his voice trembling. "It can just happen like that?" Hermione and Harry looked puzzled. Harry scratched his head. "What does wand backfire mean? Is it that bad?" "Of course it's bad," Ron swallowed. "Haven't you heard? Wand backfire will have you eaten by worms, but wand backfire will have you burned by fire." He rattled off half-remembered warnings like a nursery rhyme. "That's what I grew up hearing. In short, it's extremely dangerous." Hermione, raised in Muggle cities, tried to make sense of Ron's folklore and frowned. "So, if a wand backfire happens, you get eaten by worms and then burned? Is that literal?" Vizette smiled and, after a moment, offered another comparison. "Do you know what an electrical short circuit is? Wires connected wrong spark. You get a sudden burst, the wires burn, and the appliance is ruined." Hermione's expression eased. "Oh, then I get it. So it's like a short circuit?" Harry said, eyes widening. "Uncle Vernon once tried to do some electrical work, and he made the refrigerator catch fire. Then they blamed me," Ron added. "Said weird things always happen around me, and that's why the fridge went up." "What you call technology is their kind of magic," Vizette said. "Appliances use electricity to do things like preserve food or bake, but they can fail too, and when they do, the consequences can be just as dangerous as a wand backfire, so you have to be careful." Ron scratched his head, intrigued. "It sounds interesting. No wonder Dad's obsessed with it." Vizette returned to the wand. "Ron, may I try repairing this wand?" Ron's eyes lit up. "Can you really fix it?" For a wizard, a wand is essential. For students at a magic school, it's indispensable. "I can't promise a perfect repair," Vizette said gently. "I'll do my best to make it safe and to prevent a wand backfire." "That would be brilliant," Ron nodded eagerly. "Do you need any help?" "I'll help. I'll drag Fred and the others along if I have to." "No need," Vizette said, waving him off. "Repairing a wand is interesting in itself. I want to study it." He wanted to test his wand-making knowledge and confirm some connections. Reviewing old skills was as important as learning new ones. "What's your first class on Monday?" he asked. "Herbology," Hermione answered. "Then there's time," Vizette said. "I'll take it with me." "If you need anything, call me," Ron chimed. "Even if I don't understand, I'll bring help." "Okay." Vizette smiled and headed for the moving staircases. Rounding a corridor, he spotted Draco in his Quidditch robes. Draco flinched when they made eye contact. Vizette nodded. Draco, good afternoon. Finished training? Yes, the Nimbus 2001 is incredibly fast. Draco was still flushed. He opened his mouth to add something about a new broom, then stopped, as if remembering that morning's tension. Thanks, but I'm used to mine after a year. Draco's smile was awkward. Right? Ron watched Vizette go, then looped an arm around Harry's shoulders. Harry, come on, wizard's chess? Vizette's confidence had comforted him. By Monday, the wand would be fine. Harry looked tempted, then Hermione raised an eyebrow. Have you done your homework? I told you to last night to get it done, and you said you'd do it today. If you'd come to the library with me this morning, the wand might not have been stepped on and broken, Hermione added. Ron and Harry's linked arms dissolved. Okay, back to the common room to do homework? I need to study more, too, Hermione said seriously, frowning. Vizette knows so much. I have to catch up. You two go on. I'm going to Madame Pince to borrow more books. Ron watched her go, then turned to Harry. She's been in the library all day, didn't even have lunch. I still have a few chocolate frog packs, Harry said. Want me to take them to her? Yeah. Repairing the broken magical circuitry of a wand is like knot tying. It demands patience and precision. Vizette adapted wand-making techniques into a repair routine. First, he used a repairing charm to reconstruct the wand's exterior, then began reconnecting its internal magical circuits. He shortened and adjusted the shaft and eased tensions in the circuitry. If the inner channels are too taut after repair, the wand is liable to fail again, and a second repair becomes much harder. The work required slow, exacting motions, but it progressed smoothly. He even managed to say goodnight to Luna before slipping out of the common room to begin another night of wandering. As he dropped down the moving staircase, controlling his descent with primal force, Obscurus State Beginner, a sound brushed past him. Tearing. The voice was icy and full of malice. Though it only skimmed his ear, it carried intent. Vizette was sure of one thing. That was not the cry of a mandrake. Vizette turned and flew up the corridor outside Lockhart's office, where the sound had come from. He steadied his breathing, entered the Guardian meditation method, and released ancient magic Shield to sharpen his hearing. The surroundings fell so utterly silent it felt as if a pin could be heard hitting the floor. In that silence, even small noises in Hogwarts were amplified. He caught a faint meow. Madame Norris, no doubt. Then a gruff, exasperated voice. Wand! Someone actually left their wand. Let me try that quick incantation lesson. Lumos! Why isn't it working? Damn it! It's a plush toy. Filch. Laughter followed, sounding exactly like Fred and George, and the clank of metal as Peeves knocked over some suits of armor. Then Lockhart's voice rose, sugary and overconfident, warbling to the tune of his own praise. I'm amazing, amazing, I'm truly marvelous, marvelous. Gilderoy is top-notch. The portraits chimed in, harmonizing. The cold, malicious voice Vizette had half heard earlier didn't return, and for a moment he wondered if he'd imagined it. Leaving the corridor, he chanted, Here our time is inscribed. The mahogany cabinet's hidden gears clunked and slid. A metal door unfolded and swung open. Once was new, twice familiar. He moved down the stairs quickly, passing a storeroom and using his magic eye to pick out a pulsing silver-blue light tucked into a corner. He plucked it up, and a tall, imposing mirror materialized. Vizette stepped through, followed the platform inside downward, and came out before the familiar bronze door. He didn't pause. A short flight of steps led him to another small platform, and then to a cliff that dropped away like a screen into an abyss. Looking down made the stomach drop. The cliff ran straight into the void and upward to the starry hall, a blade of stone against the sky. A few flecks of starlight drifted and settled on a lower platform, outlining a doorway. He squinted at the doorway's carvings. Countless intricate reliefs curled like branches and rose toward a vortex-like crystal set over the entrance. The crystal, about the size of a human head, held a languid, rotating silver-blue light. Vizette raised his wand. The Obscurus core in his chest pumped out ancient magic power and sent it in a stream to the crystal. The light inside brightened, quickening its flow, and the platform under his feet trembled as a bronze path extended outward and linked to the opposite platform. Still, be careful. Can't miss Snape's lesson, he muttered, and cast Primeval Force Obscurus State Basic to float. Rather than walk the bronze path, he glided across to avoid any accidents. The crossing was uneventful. The crystal's light flickered like a welcoming torch. Another section of the mental map lit up, and he siphoned a casual store of ancient magic power before pushing through the doorway into the hall beyond. The chamber was grand, every surface carved with reliefs. 4 niches held suits of armor, and a closed doorway sat between them. The instant Vizette stepped inside, the armors shuddered, metal grinding on metal, and then they rose and rushed him. He knew their style. The suits were animated by ancient magic, a faint silver-blue light coursing through their seams. Each bore a brutal weapon: greatswords, morning stars, battle axes, warhammers. One armor hurled its battle axe straight at him. Vizette's eyes flicked across the 4 suits, and with Guardian Meditation still active, he ran through his counters. Ancient magic shield. He threw up a barrier that met the axe with a heavy clang. Battle axe, fly back, he commanded. The axe, hit by his summoning charm, tore free of its trajectory and flew toward him again. Throwing mastery. Vizette fed ancient magic power from the Obscurus core into the axe and hid it there. He flicked his wand and launched the weapon toward the armor wielding a greatsword. That armor tried to raise its blade in time, but Vizette detonated the stored power. The axe flared with silver-blue light and sliced into the greatsword armor's chest. The suit shuddered and burst apart, dissolving into a spray of shimmering motes of ancient magic. "One, Ansuz," he called. A morning star came at him next. Vizette twisted his wand and used ancient magic's swift thunder to dodge, putting distance between himself and the remaining 3 armors. The Obscurus core spewed a brilliant bolt of lightning that struck another suit weapon first, obliterating it. 2 down. He didn't wait. Ancient magic, self-shaping, devil's snare form. His fingers turned into writhing, sinuous tendrils that shot across the floor like snakes, snaring the feet of the 2 remaining armors and yanking them together. "Ah, Ansuz!" A final flash of lightning chewed through the trapped suits. All the armor in the hall dissolved, the scattered motes of ancient magic swirling back and merging into the central doorway. The doorway slid open and a new platform rose. 2 more ancient magic armors stood guard on either side of it. As Vizette prepared to deal with them, his gaze caught a niche carved into the cliff wall. Inside sat an exquisitely made metal box. Through its seams a faint crystal glow leaked out. Selena and the others, perhaps they'd hidden it here. Time was tight. He left the box unopened for now and pushed deeper into the chamber, intending to explore thoroughly before making any further plans. 234. Extraction of Memory Charm. There were quite a few ancient suits of armor stored in the chamber, and in the niches along the walls sat several metal boxes that looked like they held various magical materials. After Vizette defeated 8 more of the armors, he entered a different room. In the center stood an oddly shaped stone pillar, and above it floated an open notebook, the same style as the wizard's practical guide he had seen before. The stone pillar was actually a basin filled with a silvery substance. It looked extremely dense, but the surface moved with a subtle, liquid grace. Vizette didn't touch it. Instead, he read the floating book. On the pages flowed Selena's handwriting. "The fact that you've made it here means you've passed the trial of the armors. How does it feel? Were those armors easy to deal with? Back when I became a guardian, I also went through the torment of these big guys. But I guess it was an interesting experience, wasn't it? After you defeated those armors, you must have seen quite a few boxes, right? Use them as you please. They're your rewards for finishing the trial." The stone basin below the notebook is what's called a pensieve. As a Ravenclaw, I think you should know what a pensieve is for. The Isaiah Society has been sneaking around the world like bugs for so long they're already rolling in money, so don't be polite. You don't need to save them anything. This notebook contains a memory, recording an interesting mental magic. You may choose freely when to use these memories. Also, if you want to come here next time, you can use this notebook directly. It's a reusable portkey. It should save you a lot of time. As Vizette finished reading, the handwriting faded, gathering into a thin silver thread. It drifted up from the notebook like smoke. He remembered the description, put his hand to the stone basin, and a thoughtful look passed over his face. A pensieve, huh? A pensieve is a magical tool for viewing memories, allowing the user to experience a memory as if present from an external perspective. Because memories carry strong personal subjectivity, anyone who lacks sufficient inner strength risks being affected by that subjectivity when they experience someone else's memory. There are generally three ways to prevent this influence. Actively resist and blunt the memory's subjective pull by protecting oneself with magic like occlumency. Have the caster consciously process and purify the memory when extracting it, reducing the original subjectivity. Modify the pensieve itself so it protects the user at the source and blocks the personal bias. Vizette had built a soul labyrinth for himself and had practiced occlumency to a reasonable degree. Both measures would help him withstand being affected by the memory. He drew his wand and tapped the silver thread. It shivered but clung to the tip. Curious about this mental magic, he dipped the wand into the pensieve. The thread seemed to dissolve and smear into the silvery fluid like ink. He bent forward and lowered his face toward the basin. The instant the silver lapped at him, a weightless sensation washed over him. It felt as if his feet had left the ground and he were falling into the pensieve, moving through its depths. The memory unfolded. He found himself in a stone-walled room lit by flickering torches that left most of the space dim. 10 paces ahead stood a man in dated clothing. The man looked tired and sorrowful as he wrote in a notebook and repeatedly practiced a spell, testing rhythms, adjusting tone, reworking phrasing. At the top of his notebook page was the name, Memory Extraction Charm. From Vizette's perspective, it was like watching the spell's creator at work, seeing magic take shape from the very first attempt. The incantation had echoes of the memory charm. Compared to the memory charm, the memory extraction charm required that at the end of the casting the wand's tip be pressed to the caster's temple and then slowly drawn away. The words the man spoke were rendered in plain English in the memory. Spirit transfer, memory remove. It resembled the sound of obliviate, but the final syllable was elongated. Coordinating the intonation with the gesture, the man finally completed the charm. A wisp of silver thread, delicate as smoke, drifted out from his temple and hovered at the wand's tip. As it left him, the sadness on the man's face fell away and was replaced by relief. It was clear he had created the charm to strip himself of sorrow, to excise painful memories and no longer be haunted by them. The memory faded. Vizette felt himself settle back into the real room, the silvery surface of the pensieve trembling slightly before him. He exhaled and let the marvel of it sink in. Experiencing a spell's creation so directly was astonishing. He took out his own notebook and recorded everything he had seen and heard. Writing it down helped him digest and understand the mechanics he'd witnessed. The memory extraction charm suggested several extensions. This magic did more than extract memories. Combined with ancient magic, mind transfer charm, it might open many possibilities. If memories could be edited, then stored in a pensieve, could the pensieve be used to play a sensory movie, a crafted experience that let observers feel as if they were truly present in the scene? He wrote those ideas too. To realize them, he would need to improve the pensieve and learn how to make one himself. A true pensieve is a deep and demanding construct. Creating one would require significant skill in magical toolcraft. There was so much left to learn. The more he knew, the more of his ideas he could bring to life. Magic, he thought as he set down his pen, truly never runs out. 235. Night Tour of the Forbidden Book Zone. At the back of the pensieve room, one wall was mirror smooth, but it wasn't an ordinary mirror. Rather than reflecting Vizette's own image, it showed an abandoned stairwell. Instinctively, he muttered an ancient spell, self-sculpting, devil's net form, and after a brief probing, stepped through the glass into that derelict stairwell. Compared with the neat storage room he'd left, the stairwell was clearly neglected. Stone steps leading upward were broken in places. Loose bricks and stones lay scattered across the floor. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and the ceiling was draped in cobwebs. Vizette watched the floor. After 2 steps, the dust rose in soft clouds. A few more, and the whole stairwell might be shrouded in a misty haze. He climbed the ruined steps and, to avoid disturbing the place, deliberately left the dust alone. Before opening the door at the top, he casually cast a mending charm to erase his footprints, restoring the floor to its undisturbed state. An idea struck him. Perhaps every guardian who had entered here thought the same, and so the dust only accumulated. Above the stairwell, another spiral staircase wound upward to a statue at its summit. Floating flames danced on the statue, burning a bright yellow, and the stairs' flanking candelabras flickered with the same untiring flame. The candles don't diminish, and no wax drips. Vizette's curiosity sharpened. If so few people came here, and the flames had never gone out, they must be magical. How were they sustained? What spell? What incantation? What gestures? Was it ritual magic, or were the candelabras themselves enchanted artifacts? Thoughts crowded his mind. He checked his pocket to make sure the notebook he'd just gotten was still there. With it, returning to the Pensieve room and studying these flames later would be easy. He continued up the spiral and found the statue's design unusually sinister. 4 goats with human faces, their tails interlaced. At the top, he pushed open a door into a room thick with dust and cobwebs. Shelves and cabinets of all styles lined the walls. Strange masks hung in rows. Bookshelves were crammed, and stacks of books on the floor were draped in spider silk. On a mahogany bookcase opposite sat a glass case containing an upside-down bat specimen. One piled stack leaned so high it nearly touched the ceiling. Above the mahogany case, a portrait of a wizard in a red pointed hat nodded slowly, as if dozing. Vizette moved tiptoe quiet to avoid waking it. This room looked like a catch-all storage. Rusty armor, dust-caked porcelain, globes, desk lamps, telescopes, even wooden contraptions that resembled torture devices crowded the narrow passageways. When he pushed open another door, the realization hit him. He had found the restricted section. A grin tugged at his lips. If the Pensieve room opened into this, he would be making frequent nocturnal trips. He had seldom entered before. The air here was strange, a mingling of scents, rust and copper, congealed blood, moss and earth, and the faint sulfur tang of burnt eggs. The books themselves felt different from those in the public stacks, restless, almost alive. Some shelves looked more like cages, the books inside battering their bindings as if trying to break free. Others were chained to the cases, yet still thumped and rattled in their restraints. Titles glinted in the gloom. Most potente potions, secrets of the darkest art, powerful potions, untold history of magic, secrets in the shadows, the rise of dark wizards, and stranger, more unsettling names. Developing oneself, inscribing runes in organs, emptying his head, absorbing delicious pain. As Merlin Ambrosius said, a large portion of the restricted section dealt with the dark arts. He picked up one volume, Most Potente Potions. The cover felt disturbingly like human skin, uncannily cold, yet faintly pulsing, as if blood ran beneath it. A chill ran through him, but he could not put the book down. Inside, he found references to 2 dark arts curses he recognized: the Deep Slumber Curse and the Hanging Howl Curse. Since the book was already in his hands, he flipped through it, forcing himself past the discomfort until he had mapped its contents in his mind. Only then did he return it to the shelf. Vizette moved through the stacks, gathering in his mind the books that were not chained and could be taken out, arranging titles and subjects, storing away what he learned. Besides dark arts, many volumes treated fantastic beasts, and their pages widened his view. Ancient wizards had been far more reckless in pursuing magic, not merely observing beasts to learn from them, but experimenting with direct combinations, rituals to seize a creature's gifts, or crude methods to pass traits on to descendants. The restricted section held records of such experiments. Success was rare. More often, practitioners lost themselves, spawning new, unpredictable magical creatures. Some of those creatures became fleeting myths. Those that survived and reproduced became new species, sphinxes among them. Walking among those books, Vizette understood the section's purpose more clearly. Some knowledge simply was not meant to be read too soon. Ideas could take root and twist a person, driving them toward risks that led to ruin. The restricted section existed to keep those dangerous seeds contained, if possible. 236. The Book of Spells. Faced with such forbidden knowledge, Vizette wasn't about to experiment lightly. He still had people he cared about, many people, and he wasn't willing to risk them for rash magical trials. For now, he decided to keep his study of these subjects theoretical. When he had better safeguards and more experience, perhaps after consulting knowledgeable professors, he would consider practical experimentation. Until then, he would gather what he could from books. The restricted section offered more than dark arts tomes. On one of the less forbidding shelves, he found a normal-looking book with a dragonhide cover, the Book of Spells. By the cover, the handwriting inside, and the signature, he deduced this was an original, one reason it was kept under lock and key. This spell book will allow you to use some less basic spells, making your life richer, safer, and more colorful. The line was followed by a signature, Miranda Goshawk. Miranda had been a Hogwarts student, and the Book of Spells had been a milestone when it was published. It was a huge success, prompting many schools to replace their old spell books with this new standard. Published in the 1950s after the Wizarding World War, the book arrived at a time when the magical community, having been tempered by conflict, was more able and willing to embrace innovation. The book contained spells Vizette already knew: fire-making charm, severing charm, scouring charm, Alohomora, summoning charm, water-making charm. But it also included more complex, difficult charms: the shield charm, blasting charm, patronus charm. Previous students had annotated the margins with extras: a bubblehead charm for underwater breathing or foul air, the disillusionment charm, geminio, expulso, notations of great research value. Vizette wanted only the original contents for now, but he quickly copied down every marginal note and spell into his own notebook for future study. Even after transcribing everything, he left the restricted section with a lingering sense of dissatisfaction. There was so much more to explore. In the library's public area, the portraits increased in number. It was late. Most paintings had dozed off, nodding and snoring softly. Vizette stepped up to the door lock. "Alohomora," he whispered. The lock clicked and the library door eased open. He slipped out, cast one more quick spell on the lock, and said, "Reparo." Another click followed as the lock resealed itself. It was a small trick he'd learned from the book, handy, simple, and effective. Then a cheerful laugh carried down the corridor, two voices in tandem, the Weasley twins. "Geo, Pa, Marcus, run that way," one called. "No problem, my dearest Dryan," the other replied. A sharp meow cut through the air, followed by quick, scattered footsteps. Filch bellowed in exasperation. "Not sleeping in the middle of the night. I'll catch you. Detention for sure." Vizette nearly ran into Fred. "Why are you here?" Fred blurted, surprised. He immediately broke into a mischievous grin. "Oh, perfect timing, as expected of my dear materials consultant." "Meow," Madame Norris's plaintive cries drew closer. "If you get caught too, it'll be harder to prove we're innocent," Fred said hurriedly. He glanced around and with a conspiratorial wink turned back the way he'd come. "Quick, hide. When Filch catches me, you can sneak away." He didn't wait for an answer. He slapped his forehead in a mock farewell and sprinted off. "Bye-bye," he called over his shoulder. "Meow!" The cat, judging Fred's antics with feline disapproval, seemed unusually vigorous. Fred and Madame Norris grappled theatrically, and Filch's footfalls grew louder down the corridor. The sounds echoed: laughter, scuffling, and Filch's triumphant shouting. "Ha ha! I finally caught you! 3 years! I've waited 3 years for this day! You're finished!" Filch crowed. "Congratulations," Fred panted, still playful. "Only when we first came here could you ever catch us, huh?" "And Marcus, and Dryan, who were you trying to frame?" Filch demanded nastily. "Which house are they in?" Fred produced only a strange chuckle. "Doesn't matter. Caught you anyway," he teased. "I'm taking you to Professor McGonagall. She'll sort out your punishment." Filch continued. "There's another one, someone who looks like you. If you want to save him, come out. Your brother's in my hands." At the end of the corridor, George suddenly appeared. "Oh, playing tricks now, are we? Seems you've really improved," he called. At the other end, Vizette stepped into view. Filch spun left and right, delighted beyond measure. "What a novelty! Another one. I never expected there'd be another person. This is perfect." George's surprised look melted into a grin. "All right, as expected of my dear materials consultant, night roaming is so much fun. You finally experienced it." Despite the prank, despite the ruckus, the twins' priority, keeping others from getting into trouble, was plain. Vizette felt both grateful and slightly embarrassed by their theatrics. He had other ideas about dealing with Filch in the long term: communication, coordination, and a few well-chosen spells, and intended to prepare several contingency plans. For tonight, though, he let the twins' misdirection buy him a quieter exit, and an easier way out of detention. As expected of twins, Fred and George's words were almost identical. Vizette moved forward slowly, closing the distance to Filch. Madame Norris arched her back and bristled, a low, warning purr vibrating in her throat. "What do you want?" Filch's posture changed. The hunter had shifted into the hunted. Vizette watched him for a moment, then altered his tone, leaning into a cold, disdainful drawl that was eerily like Snape's. "Mr. Filch." It was the voice that fit the moment. Dark, cutting, laced with arrogance. Snape's voice carried weight and intimidation, and Vizette used that to his advantage. "It's 3 against 2 now. What do you think we can do?" A moment later, a loud, involuntary sneeze cut through the corridor. Snape's eyes flew open. Since the OWL exams, his sleep had been poor. Without potions, he woke easily, often from the smallest noises. He had learned to expect abrupt awakenings, especially since Harry Potter arrived at the school, when his sneezes had become disturbingly frequent. He muttered in a dry voice, "Gryffindor, 1 point." In his office, his gaze landed on the hokey pokey. With a flick of his wand, he sent a few earthworms toward it. The creature hungrily devoured them. Only then did a scattering of drowsiness settle back over him. Outside, Fred and George whistled in unison, impressed. "A strangely familiar tone," they said, and copied it. "Filch, it's 3 against 2 now. What do you think we can do?" "What are you planning?" Filch shouted, trying to sound tough but clearly rattled. He had dealt with students for years. He didn't buckle often, but his eyes darted suspiciously. "Let's get to the bottom of this and talk about what happened tonight." Vizette closed another step, wand in hand. It tapped once against his thigh with a dull, staccato sound that matched his measured pace and added to the pressure. Filch didn't answer at first. His bravado flickered. Vizette met his gaze. "Mr. Filch, solving the problem is the point, isn't it?" "Vizette, don't be so polite in that tone. It sounds weird," George snapped. "Exactly." Fred wriggled free from Filch's reach and stood grinning, hands on his hips. "We've got the advantage now." Filch looked at the 3 of them blocking the corridor, then fixed on George. "Give me that letter," he said. "Tonight's business. I'll pretend it never happened." With dramatic flair, George fumbled in his pocket and produced 2 envelopes. "Do you want this parchment envelope or this purple one?" Filch's eyes locked on the purple envelope. "Give it to me, or else." He trailed off, threatening, then launched into a grotesque fantasy of stringing them up and whipping them until their skin tore. "Oh, so that's what you wanted," George said suddenly, shaking the purple envelope with mock revelation. "No wonder you called me out." "Calm down," Fred warned. "You've forgotten the situation. We have one more person than you." When Filch wouldn't hand it over, George decided to make a show of it. "Vizette, do you know what this is?" he crowed. "Ha! It's for a rapid spellcasting course." "Meow." Madame Norris leapt up, sank her teeth into the purple envelope, and delivered it straight to Filch's hand. George yelped and waved his empty hand in the air. "Phew! Close call. Almost bit my hand off." Vizette already knew what the rapid spellcasting course was, a correspondence course offered by a magical company aimed at helping adult witches and wizards improve practical spell work. He watched the exchange and put the pieces together. The envelope, the commotion, Filch's desperate eagerness. "Filch," George added, trying to be consoling, "this course probably isn't much use for you. After all, you're a—" "Cough." Vizette cut him off, clearing his throat and waving a hand at George. Then he turned back to Filch, lowering his voice. "Mr. Filch, do you want to master magic? To actually use it?" Filch froze. The hope and fear warred in his eyes. He knew Vizette had a certain mystique about him. Even Snape treated the boy differently. Vizette's tone carried a seriousness that made Filch think there might be more to it than a tease. Filch was a squib. He had hoped, time and again, for a miracle. When he had found a wand that night, he had grabbed it and tried Lumos, desperate for it to work. It had failed. The world was cruelly consistent. Filch had no magical spark. But there were potions, and Snape was a master of them. Vizette went to Snape's office every week. Could Vizette have access to something, some potion, that could let a squib perform magic? Filch had read in the Daily Prophet about potions doing remarkable things. A wolfsbane potion could calm a werewolf's mind during a transformation. If a potion could restore a werewolf's sanity, couldn't something help squibs? The idea made Filch grit his teeth, equal parts hope and dread. "You, What method do you have? Can you really make me do magic? Filch demanded, forcing the words through clenched teeth. Vizette gave a small shake of his head, correcting him gently. Mr. Filch, he said, soft but firm, I said master magic, not merely cast a spell. 238, reaching a negotiation. Filch had wanted to blurt, "Are you messing with me?" But he forced the words down and held himself back from reaching for his cat. Vizette's tone was heavy, almost oppressive, but he kept addressing him with a surprising deference. Mr. Filch. Most people in the school called him by his name without ceremony. Filch swallowed, softened his voice, and asked, more urgently than he intended, "What do you mean?" Fred's face registered genuine surprise. "Oh, so you can speak normally. That's rare." "Indeed," George agreed. "I always thought you were born bad-tempered." Vizette cut in, polite as ever. "Mr. Filch, if I'm not mistaken, your daily duties, aside from making sure the school rules are followed, include keeping the castle clean, do they not?" "No," Fred wagged a finger. "Vizette, you're being too polite. That's not making sure the rules are followed. That's looking for trouble. He's obviously just trying to cause trouble." George chimed in. "Remember Creevy? You nearly caught him the other day, and the boy hadn't even done anything." "Shut up," Filch snapped, glaring at the twins. Then, with a nod, he answered Vizette properly. "That's right. My job is enforcing school rules and cleaning the castle." Fred and George squealed with mock awe. "Oh, wow! Then maybe you can try this." Vizette drew a sheet of parchment from his pocket and murmured a charm, "Scourgify." The paper in his hand shifted and swelled, darkening until, before Filch's eyes, it became a wand. Filch, still smarting from an earlier trick with a fake wand, resisted instinctively. "Is this going to turn into a toy, too?" he asked. "It will turn back into paper," Vizette said, "but the effect is different." He offered the wand to Filch. "Mr. Filch, you can try it." Filch's voice grew hoarse. His hand shook as he took the wand. The need to do magic, buried for decades, flared in him. "What do I do?" he asked. "Hold it like a normal wand," Vizette instructed. "Grip it fully in your palm. Do you know the hand movement for the scouring charm?" "Of course I do. And the incantation." Filch swallowed hard and blurted, impatient, "Scourgify." He bit his tongue to steady the word and clearly intoned the charm. As he flicked the wand, a soft gust of wind brushed him, lifting dust and cat fur and condensing it into a lump of mud. "The scouring charm! This is magic!" He waved the wand again and again, voice tumbling. "Scourgify! Scourgify!" The breeze persisted, but nothing more happened. Still, Filch kept waving until the wand melted back into its original piece of parchment. For a moment, he stood stunned, confusion and longing in his eyes. Holding the paper, he felt like someone awakening from a dream, still a squib, still unable to do real magic, but briefly shown what it might feel like. Vizette watched closely, cataloging what had worked and what needed improvement. The audible incantation had faded, an encouraging refinement, but the charm's effect was limited. It only worked on the caster, not on other places or people. "Mr. Filch," he said, "I have lessons to attend, so I can't spend all day on this." Hearing that, Filch was like a drowning creature handed a plank. "Do what you must," he said eagerly. "I want to cast magic." He clutched the paper with both hands, eyes bright with a longing few could understand. Vizette's tone grew measured. "Please be patient. Research takes time. There are still many imperfections." "Imperfections?" Filch echoed, incredulous. To him, the paper wand had already been a treasure, a near miracle. Vizette went on. "As a scouring charm, it shouldn't be limited to cleaning the user. It should be able to clean other places to do the work of keeping the castle tidy. To give it that function, I need to move freely about the castle to test it. Also, there are—" "Able to clean the castle?" Filch interrupted before Vizette could finish. "No problem. Absolutely no problem. Those two he's with, you mean they're allowed too, right? No problem. A few more people? Fine." The twins, in unison, rejected the idea of permission. "We don't need it." Fred grinned. "Filch, I still like your scruffy look. Come back to being that guy. This polished version doesn't suit you. We'd miss having someone to rile up on our night rambles." "Exactly," George agreed. "You're unfamiliar like this. If you behaved yourself, we'd fall asleep on our nocturnal adventures." Filch pouted and began to bargain with Vizette. After discussion, they reached an arrangement. Vizette would continue improving the fake wand's functions, and in return he would be granted greater freedom throughout Hogwarts. Not just him. Any students whose names Vizette wrote down would receive the same allowances. I'll keep my promise, Filch said, folding the list and tucking it away before hurrying down the corridor. His gait looked years younger, buoyed by hope. Watching him go, George's face lit up with an idea. So, can we use dung bombs now without worrying? Yes! Fred clapped, excited. We've always wanted to test them properly. The problem was Professor McGonagall would dock points, and cleaning up is a pain. George's eyes gleamed. He'll cast charms to remove them, and we'll work on dung bombs that even a scouring charm can't fix. Brilliant, and then we make something to remove the smell, sell them as a set, prank kits. Fred's voice was full of greedy delight. That's a fortune. Vizette only smiled. The fake wand was the first move. He had many more ideas to explore. Gaining freedom to move through the castle would be a crucial step toward putting them all into practice. After all that commotion, the three of them ended their night stroll and climbed the moving staircase. George asked curiously, Vizette, how did you come up with that set of magic you just performed? Fred was just as eager. Yeah, I thought your props were alchemy too, but that was proper magic. Maybe it's because I'm rather good at transfiguration, Vizette said with a small smile. Professor Sprout told me a theory, and I worked it into transfiguration. Professor Sprout had a theory? George and Fred exchanged looks. She kept something back. That's right, Fred said, adopting a mock-serious tone. That swamp magic isn't that simple. Of course not. She's a professor at Hogwarts, George nodded. Almost none of them are simple. Except Lockhart, they added in unison, bursting into loud laughter. Vizette only shrugged. Professor Lockhart was genuinely peculiar, hopelessly out of sync. Fred, George, want to hear the theory? I can tell you. Fred's eyes lit up. That theory? You can tell us? Isn't it Professor Sprout's secret weapon? George chimed in, excited. Vizette shook his head. I wasn't the only one there when she explained it. Luna and Hannah listened too, and we all helped with the herbs. Then tell us now. The Weasley twins rubbed their hands together in perfect unison. Vizette took out his notes, and as they walked up the stairs, began to explain the Rubik's Cube theory. Fred and George, who both had stronger magical foundations than most of Vizette's classmates, were quick to grasp its wonder. So that's how it works, George said, eyes wide with sudden understanding. I think we could make that biting teacup now. Fred shook his head in mock despair. The younger generation is terrifyingly formidable. George, do you think we should— I know what you mean, George interrupted. He just spoiled such a neat secret for us. It's not like a secret. Vizette heard them and waved a hand. Professor Sprout told me everything. She told you, so why should you hide it? At most, you're being generous with someone else's property, right? George teased. But you added your own take on it. That's important. Fred pressed. Since you're sharing something so valuable. Are we the kind of people to be stingy? George said. He dug into his pocket and, after a moment of fumbling, pulled out a roll of parchment. It was old and square, the edges worn and the corners soft with age. Vizette did not underestimate it. In the magical world, old objects often held powerful charms and ripe material for study. He cast his magic eye and saw the parchment's magical circuit was staggeringly complex, more tangled than a mandrake's, like a knotted ball of yarn. Around that yarn-like knot, other circuits fanned out from the parchment like a spider web. George wiped his brow. Finally found it. I hid it deep to lose Filch. Fred and George exchanged a more serious look. Fred said, Vizette, this is our biggest secret. George added, but you're not ordinary. You're our favorite materials consultant and now our official night-walking companion. We can trust you. Is this connected to Hogwarts? Is it a map? Vizette guessed. Oh, what are you doing? Fred protested, unable to keep his mock-serious face. Don't guess so accurately. Let us finish. And then give us a surprised expression, like you feel honored, George said, blinking exaggeratedly and hopeful. He wasn't watching his step and stubbed his toe on a stair, nearly falling. Watch the steps, Vizette snapped. Then he and Fred grabbed George's arms and steadied him. Touched, so touched. George pulled them down onto the steps and unrolled the parchment. The square sheet looked blank. Vizette, don't blink, Fred urged. George took out his wand, pressed it to the parchment, and tapped while intoning in a solemn voice, I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Where his wand touched, an ink blot appeared. It spread and resolved into precise lines that drew the outline of Hogwarts Castle. Above the castle, a string of green text unfurled. Messrs. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's map. The once thin parchment thickened as if transfigured into a little booklet. George handed the Marauder's map to Vizette. "Open it and have a look." Fred cleared his throat. Surprised expression. "It's genuinely astonishing." Vizette complied perfectly, widening his eyes. "It looks truly magical." Through his magic eye, Vizette watched the yarn-like magical circuit unfurl across the whole sheet and become clearer. The thickening of the parchment itself was a long-lasting transfiguration, another detail worthy of study. Just watching the map form gave him new ideas. He spread the map open. It depicted Hogwarts and its grounds in meticulous detail. What caught Vizette's attention most were the black smudges scattered near the house common rooms, 4 large smudges that marked where sleeping students were located. He scanned toward the area marked Headmaster's Office. Albus Dumbledore's name paced back and forth there. Professor Snape was awake too in his office, pacing around as well. 240. Map secret room. Vizette glanced at the moving staircase to confirm where he was. On the Marauder's map, his name and the Weasley twins' names sat on the 5th-floor landing. He pointed to 2 parallel dashed lines and asked, curious, "George, do those dashed lines mean secret passages?" "That's right," George beamed at the tone in Vizette's voice. "We learned a lot from this little treasure." Fred wore the same smug grin. "At least we got more out of it than Lockhart or Trelawney did." Vizette nodded. "So the secret passages you told me about before, those came from this map?" George folded his arms. "Exactly. Most of our secret routes were found on this thing." "Praise Moony and Wormtail," George added. "They were bloody brilliant. Praise Padfoot and Prongs," Fred said. "All that help came from them. With their help, we could finally take Filch on. That man knows too many hiding spots." "Oh, if you don't want to look anymore, just take out your wand and tap it," George prompted. Following his instructions, Vizette took out his wand and tapped the map. Mischief managed. The Marauder's map shrank before his eyes. The ink receded, and the intricate drawing collapsed back into an old square of parchment. Vizette tried to hand it back, but George pushed it back into his hands. "You keep it. We've got it all memorized." Vizette started. "But—" "No buts," Fred cut him off. "Really? We want to keep playing games with Filch. So, finding a secret base? That's on you now." "Thank you," Vizette said solemnly, genuinely moved. From both practical and scholarly standpoints, the map was priceless, and for the twins to hand it over so readily, he felt they considered him a true friend. "Your face is great right now," George said, making a mock photography gesture. "Even better if you had tears." Fred laughed. "Vizette, you shared the Rubik's Cube theory with us. Of course, we have to give you something good back. Don't be like that." "All right, I'll find the secret base," Vizette promised. He remembered the twins had mentioned this at the start of term. He actually knew a place that would be perfect, as Selena had told him about it, so he'd need to ask her permission first. On the way back to the common room, Fred and George traded war stories about their first year and all the ways they'd outwitted Filch. Before they'd found the Marauder's map tucked in a drawer marked "Confiscated Items Highly Dangerous," they'd been at a constant disadvantage, often caught and dragged to Filch's office for detention, and tormented by McGonagall's point deductions. The map had changed everything. Back in the common room, Vizette didn't go straight to the dormitory. He sat in a chair and opened the notebook Selena had left him. He remembered her letter, saying they would try to give you corresponding help. But at the end of the Guardian's chamber, there had been only this notebook. It seemed to be portkey warded, so it could hide other magics. The cover bore a swirling crystal, very similar to the mechanism in the chamber. Vizette placed the tip of his wand against the crystal and tried to feed it ancient magic. The crystal glowed a silvery blue, and its inner vortex began to move. A message traveled down the wand and into his mind. Just as he'd suspected, the notebook could serve as a portkey and a communication device to reach Selena and her group. He opened the notebook and, using his wand as a pen and ancient magic as ink, wrote, "Madam Pendragon, hello. I would like to use that warehouse room, if that's all right." Before he could close it, Words appeared across the page. What a polite junior. I didn't expect you to find the notebook so quickly. You're a person of action. That warehouse room? You mean the mysterious corridor, right? Of course you can use it. Vizette wrote back. Okay, thank you. Next time, just call me Selena, the reply said. Also, you're still up late. Have you discovered the joys of night excursions? Yes, Vizette answered. I found many interesting books in the restricted section. The restricted section, she mused, what a nostalgic time. Oh, and one more thing. The portkey in the notebook doesn't just lead to the chamber behind the mysterious corridor. There's another place you can go. Another place? That place is called the map chamber. It took me ages to find it back then. If you're interested, you can check it out sometime. Vizette thought of the ancient magic armor in the mysterious corridor. Entering the map chamber would likely involve similar trials. Dumbledore had told him at the end of last year that he would teach him how to cast armor magic. He planned to learn armor magic first, then explore the map chamber. Facing the ancient defenses directly would be the best way to hone his understanding of the spell. On Sunday morning, he spent most of his time in potions, brewing a large cauldron of developing potion, enough for an entire semester. The plan was working. With the potion done, he still had time to borrow Colin Creevy's Polaroid and take dozens of pictures with Luna by the Black Lake. After soaking the prints in developing potion, the scenes and people in the photos would move, preserving the moment and the emotions from when they were taken. It was oddly delightful. At 1:50 p.m., 10 minutes early, Vizette arrived at Professor Snape's office. The room hadn't changed much, except for a cloth-covered lump in the corner that made faint rustling sounds, like something gnawing on a bone.